Hey, what's up guys, it's BenBonk and welcome back to the 44th Slimekeep Devlog. In this devlog, I spiced up the rooms in the game and added some more lore. Also, if you're new here, Slimekeep is a fast-paced roguelike where you must kill and capture slimes to stop the corruption that has infected your land. Without further ado, let's get into it. So, the main thing I wanted to work on in this devlog was the general look of the rooms in the game. Specifically the fact that many of these rooms still felt pretty empty. So to start off, I got some feedback about pits in the game. And the thing is, while there are these pit traps, oftentimes they're pretty scarce, and if you do encounter one, they're also typically pretty small. So I wanted to do two things to these pits. First, add more of them, and second, increase their overall sizes. However, before I could increase their sizes, I needed to make a few tweaks to the pit code. And admittedly, this code was pretty bad. It would just respawn the player slightly left of the center position of the pit after the player falls into it. Now, this was an easy solution at the time, but it meant that if I wanted to have especially large pits in the game, I would run the risk of having infinite pits, where essentially the player would keep on respawning inside of the pits, guaranteeing their death. So to fix this, I simply added a respawn position field to all pits, made the player respawn at this designated position, and kind of tediously had to specify this position for every pit in the game. But after that, the pit system was now pretty much good to go. I started off by making this cool rule tile for the pits to help speed up adding them to rooms, which I really have no clue why I didn't make one earlier. And then I really just spent a bunch of time going through each room in the game, adding more pits, adding bigger pits, and expanding the sizes of old pits. But once I was done, the rooms definitely felt a lot better in my opinion. Moving on, I've always thought that entering boss rooms has been a little boring. Right now, there's just this wipe effect that doesn't really look too good in my opinion. And actually a fan of the devlogs named Flack Rabbit reached out to me and informed me that he had made a bunch of really cool high-res sprites for all the bosses in the game. We had the Slime King, the Samurai, the Mech, the DJ, and the Chopper, all of which looked awesome and would be perfect for boss intros, so huge thanks to Flack Rabbit. Now to actually set up these intros, first I created this example boss intro panel in-game based on some concept art that Flack Rabbit sent me. Now all I had to do was animate these intros, and with the help of tweening, I got all the intros set up. So we had the Mech boss intro, the Chopper boss intro, the Samurai intro, and so on. Overall, I think these intros really added a lot to the boss fights, so let me know what you think. But personally, I think that you should check out the sponsor of this video, .fun domains. .fun domains give you the opportunity to use the .fun extension on your own websites and hopefully make them a lot more fun. This type of extension is perfect for all kinds of gaming or development related websites and is a nice breath of fresh air from your typical .com domain. I even made my very own website with a .fun domain. Right now you can visit slimekeep.fun and see the official website for Slimekeep. From here you can wishlist the game on Steam and do a few other small things. But I just think it's nice to have an official website for the game, especially with a .fun domain, because hopefully you should be having fun when you play Slimekeep. So if you want to grab a .fun domain for yourself, check out get.fun by clicking the link in the description and use my special code BenBonk to get 90% off your very own .fun domain. Anyways, next up, let's talk about the visuals of the rooms in the game. As I mentioned before, a lot of people thought the whole look of rooms were a bit plain and boring and just really repetitive, which I definitely agreed with and wanted to fix. So to start, Execute Baja in my Discord server made these tile set additions where essentially the room tiles in the game have these added vines and bricks. I thought just adding these sporadically could be a great idea, so I did just that. I placed some of these unique tiles around the hub room for example, and even though it's pretty subtle, I think this little bit of variation definitely helps. Now, before I applied these unique tiles to every room in the game, I had another trick up my sleeve. I thought it'd be really cool to change the core tile set of the rooms in the game to be slightly more corrupted as time passes to make the rooms not seem so repetitive as you play through, and to furthermore sell the idea of the corruption in the game affecting the player's environment. So I hopped into Sprite and made 4 variations of the main tile set. As you can see, each core variation gets ever so corrupted, which I thought looked really cool. Now to try these out in game, firstly we had the first variation. As you can see, there's definitely a noticeable change here, but nothing too crazy, it just looks slightly more messy. Then we have the second variation, which I think is definitely a step up. Then we have the third variation, and the fourth and final variation. So yeah, I definitely thought this concept was promising, but before I could edit all the existing rooms, I made the appropriate variations for the inside collidable tiles and a few other necessary tiles in the game. Then I just made this massive tile set with all the variations in one place in Unity and got to work. I'm not gonna lie, this kind of took ages to go through every single enemy room in the game and add these variations to the appropriate difficulty room. But as per usual, I pushed through, and after a few hours of work, I got it done. Now, as you can see here, in the normal difficulty 1 rooms in the game, which are the first rooms you encounter, and the easiest rooms difficulty-wise, the tile set remains the same. However, when I enter a difficulty 2 room, you can see the variation in place. Again, it starts off pretty subtle, but as I progress, the rooms get slowly more corrupted and messy, which I think is awesome. We end up on the final variation in the difficulty 5 rooms, or the hardest in the game, and the tile set honestly looks almost unrecognizable from the original at this point. So yeah, overall, super happy with these tile set changes, but we still weren't done quite yet. Remember those vine and brick variations from earlier? Well, I did another run through of all the rooms in the game, adding in variations here and there. And with that done, here are a few of the later rooms in the game with these slight variations in place. They're pretty small additions, but definitely help with the overall variation of things and add a bit more of life to the rooms, which I'm pretty happy about. But I'm also pretty happy about the fact that Slimekeep has gained a total of 7 wishlists on Steam. Thank you guys for your support, but can we get this number to 10 wishlists? It's up to you guys, but please do consider wishlisting the game on Steam by clicking the link in the description. It really helps. But moving on, I still wasn't quite done spicing up these rooms. I wanted to add some more inside decorations to the rooms, so I made these 2 tables and these 2 turrets as potential obstacles. Next, I also got some feedback to add more kinds of houses to the rooms. After all, this is Slimetopia, and there are plenty of slimes and residents living in it, and it also felt like a good idea to have natural environments sort of creep into the enemy rooms by adding houses and other things to make the enemy rooms feel less separated from the dedicated lore rooms. So yeah, I made a bunch of different small house concepts, and actually at the same time, Execute Baja in my Discord server offered to make a bunch of houses and buildings of her own, which was really helpful. First, she made this sample house, which I edited slightly in Sprite to fit the rest of the shading in the game a bit more. And this process really repeated itself over the next few days. Execute Baja would make these really cool buildings, I would make a few changes, and boom, we were starting to build up an arsenal of buildings for the game. By the end, we had quite a few buildings as follows. First, this small house that I mentioned before, then this kind of gas station called the Goose Station, then an entire apartment building, and finally another cool little house. Overall, I think these buildings looked amazing, so huge thanks again to Execute Baja for helping make them. Now, it was time to start adding some of these decorations and buildings to rooms. But first, remember that turret I mentioned earlier? I set it up in game, so now it'll actually shoot at the player every few seconds. Also, if the player stands behind it, it won't actually shoot projectiles backwards, which I think is nice. But now we had a bunch of new decorations added to the rooms in the game, and we also had some sign decorations as well, and all the new houses / obstacles. So with that said, it was time to get to work, and you get the gist by now. I spent a bunch of time adding all these decorations to the rooms, and other rooms just felt way better in my opinion. You can see all the new houses and benches and signs and so on, which I really do think help a ton in adding more life to the rooms. So yeah, rooms should hopefully feel a lot better now. But what about those unique buildings like the Goose Station I mentioned earlier? Well, personally, I thought it would be a little weird to just throw the Goose Station into a random room. I really wanted it to be interactable and kind of like a dedicated room in itself, so I came up with the solution to make these unique sorts of buildings into their own dedicated lore rooms. I already had 3 lore rooms in the game, such as the library and the tavern, but admittedly, this didn't really feel like enough, and hey, Slimekeep could always do with a bit more lore. So I set off on the journey to turn the Goose Station into a fully fleshed out room. First, since this was a Goose Station, we needed some cars. So I drew a few in Sprite, and first we had this pretty sick looking kind of sports car, then we had this standard run-of-the-mill car, and finally a truck. And I wanted some of these cars to have owners, so I made this truck driver guy with a simple idle animation, as well as a cool looking guy with another idle animation. So with all that art made, I spent some time setting up the actual Goose Station room and ended up with this. As you can see, we obviously have the Goose Station building, but we also have the outside area with 3 goo pumps, some cars, and the respective NPCs. I thought this scene looked awesome and just super lively overall. And even if this scene might have felt lively, the NPCs sure weren't because we still couldn't actually talk to them. So using my previously created dialogue system, I set up some test dialogue for the NPCs, so now I could actually hypothetically talk to them. But before I ended up writing dialogue for these NPCs, I wanted to make the actual Goose Station building enterable. So I drew up some sprites, set some things up, and boom, if the player now walks to the door of the Goose Station, they can actually enter it and also interact with the NPCs inside of it. So now that we had this all set up, I got to writing the dialogue for these NPCs. I won't really show too much here as I don't want to spoil anything, but hopefully you can get a bit more lore information from these NPCs. So with the NPC dialogue done, I probably could have ended the creation of the goose station right there, but at the same time, I didn't want it to feel kind of plain and just a room where you walk into it, talk to a few NPCs, and leave. Firstly, if I talk to the goo station shopkeeper, I can actually purchase goo from him for 25 slime balls. What this goo is for exactly, well, you'll just have to see. Though just please don't purchase it on pump number 2, as you may cause a bit of a goo leak. Next, I made it so these shop aisles actually have a purpose, and the player can now purchase the slime juice upgrade from them. This upgrade just felt the most fitting in this situation, as it's the only upgrade in the game that resembles food or drink, and if you don't know, it increases the player's health, movement speed, and dash speed. And for the final touch in the goo station, I started to work on the arcade machine that you may have seen in the corner here. First, I made it so that if the player walked up to this machine, it would display their interact key as well as an indicator that the machine costs 5 slime balls to play. Then I just kind of went head under and forgot to record most of the process here, but we got Goopy Bird, which is definitely not similar to any other mobile game that was super popular in early 2014. No, I'm serious, it's kind of similar to what you may be thinking of, but not really. In Goopy Bird, you can squish this slime, or bird I guess, and increase its upward velocity. But instead of some potential evil pipes, we have these rockets that fling across the screen and increase in fire rate as the game goes on. And yeah, I just personally think that rockets are way cooler than randomized pipes, and it's totally not due to the fact that I didn't feel like programming such pipes and a parallax background and stuff. But that's Goopy Bird for you, and hopefully it can offer as a nice minigame in the actual game and give the player a bit of a break. But that's all I have for this devlog. Stay tuned for the next one and maybe consider subscribing if you want to see what I make out of the rest of the lore room buildings. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.